Hello and welcome, everybody. We'll do it again.
I got an injury before we even started the show. That hurt so bad. I cracked my wrist. Okay, go ahead.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the No Name Music Cast. My name's Tim, and this is
Joy.
And once again, I'd like to thank all of our listeners to the No Name Music Cast for tuning in. We see the numbers are growing week on week. I looked at the stats this week, and we welcome listeners from France and from Europe. Well, France is in Europe. You know what I mean.
Tim, you're literally from Europe.
Well, not
they
well.
might give you a pass on that one.
I was from Europe when I left, but if I was to return, it would no longer be in Europe. But anyway, that's a complicated discussion for another time.
I'm just saying that was a Joy statement if I've ever heard one.
Well, Europe, England, France, Singapore. We have listeners in Australia.
We still haven't hit Antarctica yet.
No, we don't. We're still trying to crack the Antarctic market, but
we did hit Papua New Guinea, though.
Oh, well, welcome, Papua New Guinea. Welcome on board. We are glad to have you. So, before we get into this week's topic, and it's Joy's topic this week, I set Joy a little cultural task, as it will. Now, some of our listeners, Gilbo, will hate this, but some of our listeners, Phil, will love this. So, I gave Joy a flash drive with almost the complete works of Alan Partridge on it. So, I'm interested to know what Joy thinks.
So I have questions. Not surprising. I mostly just watched Knowing Me, Knowing You, which now I can't get a ha out of my head. But with that being said, so I get that he's supposed to be a bumbling idiot talk show, right? Host, like he's the idiot and he can't like, you know what I mean? Like he's making fun of the talk show host as a whole, even though that's his character. So here's my question. Are the guests he's bringing in, are those actual like people that are famous in Britain or are they characters?
No, they're characters. Some of them, if you watch it, some of them repeat through the various episodes in different.
That's what I thought because I saw someone more than once and I was confused.
However, Minnie Driver is in one of those episodes, and she was not a known actress at the time.
So, like, I watched the episode with the girl who supposedly was the Neil Sedaka found her, and then they sing the ABBA, which ironically, when they do the ABBA medley, you can tell in a lot of actors like this, he has actually a good voice, but he's faking he doesn't have a good voice. Like if he wanted to sing it, I think he could sing it well. But I love the ABBA reference there. And then there was like the episode, and ironically, the last one was with the person who was transgender and he didn't read the book, and then he's upset. And I was like, that did not age well. But then at the same time, I'm like, no, it kind of did because everybody in the audience and like everybody on the show, like, dude, you're an idiot. Like it did kind of age well. And then I get why Tim keeps saying a ha at me now.
See, there you go.
There is a reference there that I'm getting. I like it. It feels very early 90s SNL. Sometimes it's a little hard because I don't always get the British references. But then sometimes I do and I'm like, okay, well, I get that. But I don't hate it. I actually found it pretty funny. I found myself laughing a few times. At first, I was like, what am I getting myself into? Because, like, what was it with there was like a dog, like he gave her a dog. And she was like...
yeah, Victorian dogs. And then she says, no, I collect Victorian dolls.
I thought that was really funny and laughed for like 20 minutes because my humor's kind of like that. But I can say I'm not 100% sold on Alan Partridge, but I'm above Jobo, and I do find it funny.
Okay. Now, did you watch I'm Alan Partridge, the bit where he's living in the travel tavern?
No, but I did read up on it because that's my next thing I'm going to, because it's supposed to be like, is that the one where, no, where's the one where he's making fun of himself as like the failed talk show host? Is that I'm Alan Partridge or is that another one?
That's another one. I'm Alan Partridge. Is at the end of Knowing Me, Knowing You.
I haven't made it that far.
He shoots Forbes McAllister, and then he gets his TV deal is hanging in the balance. Now, did you watch the Christmas special?
Yes.
So he punches Tony Hayes with the turkey on his hand, and then he says, "I'm never going to work in TV again."
Yeah.
So Tony Hayes takes away his TV series, and he's now living in a travel tavern, and he's doing the graveyard shift at Radio Norwich, and his wife has left him for a narcissistic sports.
Well, that is the next one on the list. So we will have an ongoing for the next 2 weeks checkup on Alan Partridge, because that's next. Because I did see him punch with the turkey on his hand. That's kind of where I left off at, actually.
and it has Mick Hucknall from Simply Red in it singing "Ding Dong Merrily on High."
Of course. These are all that's the thing is I'm like, man, there's so many British references, but the humor is really good because it's such a dry wit. And I appreciate like I'm the kind of person that said, like you're watching something, they're like, oh, I'm going to fight you with my bare hands. And then they hold up actual bare paws. Like, I find that funny. So I find Alan Partridge funny. Sorry, Jobo. I find that like the Victorian dolls. I don't know why, but that made me laugh for 20 minutes. But then I kept thinking, are these real British people I've never heard of? And then I'm like, no, they have to be like fake SNL characters, right?
Yeah, some of them are writers of the program. Doom McKeegan's one of the writers and she appears in Knowing Me, Knowing You.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. And but in all honesty, I can't get ABBA Knowing Me, Knowing You out of my head now, Tim. So there's that. And I keep going, really dramatically. And I'm like, stop it.
And one thing that's interesting about Knowing Me, Knowing You, when they filmed it, it was filmed in Teddington, which is just down the road from where I used to live in Twickenham. So it's a TV production studio that I've driven past. I know where that is.
Well, aren't you basically a member of ABBA anyway? So
yeah, I mean ABBA, you know how it is. So, but the interesting thing is that when Steve Coogan filmed that, when it had an in-studio audience, as some of those comedy shows do.
Yeah.
But when Steve Coogan filmed it, the minute he entered the studio, he was completely in character. So have you ever seen a TV show being taped?
Yes.
Yeah, so like you file in with the audience. They often have a warm-up person, and then they have they'll tell you what's going to happen. They tell you when to clap and all that kind of stuff. I
went to Good Morning America when I was in New York. If anybody's wondering, continue.
Yeah, it's the same principle. So when they filmed Knowing Me, Knowing You, Alan Partridge was the warm-up act. It was Steve Coogan playing Alan Partridge. So he was in character the minute he came in. Even before the camera started rolling, he did a whole thing as Alan Partridge. And he goes, now I'm going to go off, and now we're going to shoot the program. And then he goes off, and then the titles start. And then even when the filming wrapped, when everyone was filing out, it was the same thing. He remained in character the entire time.
That's amazing. So that makes it so much funner for everybody who's there. So, I had a thought, but now it's gone. Oh, man, I lost it. I will think of it in a minute, and I'll yell it out, and I'll just say Stevie Nicks when I figure it out. If you haven't listened to that episode, please go back and listen to the other episodes, and that will make complete sense to you. I had a thought about Alan. So Alan Partridge, that's what it was. I was like, I know his face. Why do I know this Steve guy's face? So he was in Night at the Museum. Did you know that?
Yes, I did.
He's one of the other little characters or whatever with Owen Wilson, where they're doing the Cowboys and Indians. Mm-hmm. I was like, I spent like 10 minutes when it was going on. I was like, why do I know that face? Why do I know that face? Why do I know that face? And I was like, what is he from? So I started Googling. I was like, Not at the Museum. I remembered him as a little character.
He was also in Tropic Thunder, which is not a film I particularly enjoyed, but
I watched it.
He's in that too.
I didn't particularly. I rewatched Tropic Thunder, but it's like you said, I don't really remember it that well. With that being said, I remembered it from Night at the Museum, and I just thought you'd find that funny that I spent 10 minutes going, why do I know this guy? And then I watched one episode where it was about where he was in, I think the very first episode, Paris.
Oh, the Paris episode is fabulous.
I will say that one stood out to me. Whenever he was speaking to the girl, and like at one point, I think he tried to speak French, and I was like, "What is happening?"
Her name is Nina Vonnier.
Of course it is, Tim. I appreciate that you know all the names. I'm still very much watching, going, "Okay, I get that reference. Who is that person?" And Googling what this British reference. Anyway, there you go, Phil. I did appreciate Alan Partridge, and I will report back more when I have watched more.
There you go. For me, peak Partridge is I'm Alan Partridge, which the first season, which you're going to get into when he's living in the Travel Tavern. There was a time in my life where I could almost recite the entire script of all 6 episodes.
I love that. We always say, Tim, when Tim likes something, he really likes something. He always has to go next level.
And even now, thanks to Phil, he bought me this great Partridge book, which I've been, I've got it here, Phil. And I've been reading through that, and it's like I've just been topping up my Partridge knowledge. It's fantastic.
There's so many people who listen to podcasts going, who the heck is Phil? So Phil is a listener of the podcast that is a big Alan Partridge fan.
And I'd just like to go on record and say Phil is a legend.
Phil is a legend.
There we go.
I agree with that.
Okay, so that was the Partridge section of the podcast. So, as I said before, it's Joy's turn to pick the topic. And she's told me today, in fact, that she's very excited for this topic. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Joy.
All right, Tim. I am very excited for this spicy topic. We're going to talk about it from A to Z.
Okay.
Those were all puns. Spice Girls! Woo! Yay! So if you guys didn't get it, the wannabe reference. So here's the story from A to Z. That was the joke. Anyway.
I get you.
There's an awkward pause, like, get it, Joy. No, I'm very excited because it's well overdue. We've talked about the Spice Girls about 1,000 times. I'm going to spend a little bit of time. So I'm going to give a little forewarning. I know there's somebody out there rolling their eyes going, oh, Spice Girls. We don't have the rights to play any of their music anyway. So even if you don't want to hear the music, it's not going to be played on the episode, especially just we talk about historical things with the Spice Girls and how they came to be. And so it's very interesting to see how some people would say a manufactured band. Is that the term, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of pop acts, Spice Girls, I don't know, Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, whatever, people criticize them for being manufactured like it's a new thing, but like the Monkees were manufactured. I mean, a lot, you can go back all the way through history, and a lot of pop acts were
110%. I mean, the Monkees weren't even a band. They were just a show that became like a band.
Do you know where the Monkees came from?
I do slightly, but I'll let you tell it because my mom used to tell me about it as a kid, but I don't remember it specifically.
Well, the Beatles came out with the film A Hard Day's Night, and it was a huge hit, absolutely huge hit. And the American audiences, well, not American audience, but the American broadcasting companies wanted something for their audience that was very similar. So they decided to put together a completely manufactured act.
That's what
my
mom would tell me as a kid. I thought it was a TV show, but maybe it's a movie.
Well, Hard Day's Night was a film, but of course the Monkees is a TV series. But they wanted something to cash in on that Beatles Hard Day's Night fever. And the reason that it's spelled Monkees, not like monkeys as in the primates, is because you can't trademark just a regular word. But if you have a wacky spelling, you can trademark it.
Huh. I mean, that makes sense, though. Well, there you go. Yeah, my mom used to talk about the Monkees weren't they weren't an actual band, like they were manufacturers. I heard her say that many times when I was a kid. But I mean, I like the Monkees. They're pretty good. So with that being said, manufactured bands, we're going to step right into it. So I found a thing that was literally A to Z about the Spice Girls. While I don't think we have the time to talk about A to Z about the Spice Girls, I am going to give you a brief history. And A is for auditions. So there was it was a father-son duo, Bob and Chris Herbert. They wanted to come up with a female pop band to rival the male pop bands of the time. Not that shocking. So on March 4th, 1994, 400 aspiring singers crammed into London's Danceworks studios after sporting an ad that said they're looking for girls. With that being said, Mel B blew them away, singing Whitney's Greatest Love of All, which is not shocking because she is known as being one of the best singers of the group. Mel C went for, we think we talked about this in the last episode, the Pointer Sisters, I'm So Excited. And Victoria chose Mehir from Cabaret, which makes sense because she's got that voice. A month later, they're all invited back to a second audition with only 10 girls. Geri was there. She skipped the initial audition after getting sunburnt in Spain. I thought that was random. She was just ill and pleaded to be fast tracked to recall, blah, 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 which they liked her. They picked Geri. She wasn't necessarily like, she was kind of handpicked, so it makes sense that they let it go because she fit that whole redhead, British, whatever thing they were going for.
Sure.
Geri was picked strictly, I hate to say this, typecasting. I guess that's the word for it. But anyway, all four were selected along with a 17-year-old Michelle Stevenson, the sort of girl that you could imagine Victoria said but I guess she ended up falling out later. And then that's when they found Emma. So Emma's Baby Spice. She was a former stage school pupil who'd been recommended by a vocal tutor whenever the other girl didn't make it through. They don't really say much about her, but basically she just didn't fit in.
Okay.
She wasn't a good fit.
That's your HR prowess coming out saying that she wasn't a good fit.
Yes, ma'am. I told you, ma'am, sir. But it's not a ma'am. I said, yes, ma'am. Don't know where that came from. Anyway, Tim.
Moving on, Joy. Moving on.
So I had to bring this up because Phil has talked very, very heavily about the Bob and Chris and I don't think Tim was there. This is the same Phil from earlier, but he loves the story of the tapes where they stole the tapes from their record companies. So basically they put these girls together. They lived in a house. They learned to sing. They learned to dance, and they became what you know of the Spice Girls. I'm just going to leave it at that. But what they did was at one point in time, this Bob and Chris, or whatever their name is, Bob and Chris, their father's son, the guys who invented them. And then later, I think they ended up with Simon, but they didn't like them. They were fed up with them. They were over it. And they had written a demo for a song. I think it's Two Became One.
Okay. And
they snuck the tapes out. Literally, Geri did. She stuck the tapes out of the song in her knickers, very British word for it, and hid it because they were trying to get out from underneath them. Let me find the exact. I want to say it's Two Become One, but don't quote me on it. But Tim. So Phil has talked very heavily about, he thought that was really cool. They thought that basically Chris and this guy weren't giving them their full what they needed, and they were tired and they wanted to get out from underneath them, and they had recorded this demo for him, and rather than let them put it out, they stole it.
So this whole business about sneaking the tapes out in her underwear, it almost sounds like a plot of Spice World. It's like they'd written Spice World even before Spice World was a thing.
Hey, I see what you did there, Tim. So anyway, yes. So basically, they wanted to get away from them, and they didn't want them to have the demo for Two Become One, and they stole it. What became of it after that and how they really went on, I'm not 100% sure, but it was one of their very first, and they didn't think they were getting what they deserved with the song. And so they said, and they didn't think they were getting treated well by the producers. And to be honest, I mean, I think that's true with the Backstreet Boys. Remember, they had a whole fallout with theirs, and Zeke had a whole fallout with theirs. So it might not be that uncalled for, I guess.
No.
Is that the word I'm looking for, Tim?
Possibly.
But yes, it was Geri, and Victoria called them very Bonnie and Clyde. She said, I don't know how she did it. She didn't tell anybody she was going to do it. She said, next thing we know, we walk out and she's pulling out our demo tapes. She stole from them so they couldn't put the song out. So that is the first thing that I thought was really cool about them. And I will say this, and maybe you guys don't agree, but I feel like people think that when they hear manufactured band, that does not mean that they can sing. But did you hear what songs it said they sang for an audition? They had to audition against 400 other people, Tim. It's not like they woke up one day and the people are like, you look like you're going to be a member of the Spice Girls. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it makes absolute perfect sense. You find a lot of these auditions for this stuff, they're typically people that have been involved with theatre, musical theatre, or have some kind of in the industry. Like you say, they're not just, it's not like Pop Idol or whatever that's called these days, where Bob sings in his shower and it's like, well, I'm going to be a big singer.
Yes. And so it's like, I feel like that's what people instantly think when they hear it. And so, here it is. So it was months after rehearsal. The girls grew, and I did confirm it's to become one. I was just speaking from that story from experience. They hatched a plan to retrieve the recordings and make off with them. And they said basically they stole them and working from the back of Geri's beaten up Fiat Uno, which Tim has confirmed is a car. I don't know. I mean, I know what Fiat is.
My mum had a number of Fiat cars. She had a number of Fiat Unos, and then she had a Fiat Punto.
But basically, sorry, Tim.
Yeah, I was going to say, Fiat is a brand that was sold in the United States for a while.
Yeah.
And it's no longer sold. Well,
it's Italian, right?
Yeah, they bought them back. Didn't they have those Fiat 500s? You used to see some of those on the road.
It's a Fiat something. I've seen a Fiat before, but I don't know what they were specifically called.
And they were known for being mostly poor quality and rust buckets.
Well, apparently the Spice Girls have one. Anyway, so they built their new team out of it, and then they ended up signing with it. That specifically says this was Annie Lennox manager, which I didn't know, Simon Fuller.
Oh.
Immediately put them in the studio and started introducing them to record labels, whatever the word is. Labels, that's what I was trying to say, everybody. And basically they ended up with Virgin Records. That's where they ended up at. And that's where most, I would say, early 90s pop artists went through, right?
I think so.
I feel like that's where the Backstreet Boys and all my albums that I had back in the day all said Virgin Records.
The thing you have to remember is that an artist could be on a label in one country and then they would have a distribution deal with another label. Because like Queen were on EMI in the UK, but in the United States they were on Elektra. And then after a while, that Elektra deal expired, and they're now on Hollywood Records in the US, but they're on EMI in the UK.
Makes sense. So the reason I brought up the Spice Girls was it was just on the 12th of this month, so a few days ago. It was the anniversary of their first live concert in Istanbul. So on October 12th, 1997. They ended up playing in Istanbul, Turkey. They said one popular theory as to why it was Istanbul, because they wanted to stay away from the UK as far as possible, afraid of the British press, which is sad because you said the British press could be nasty, from what I understand. And they thought that it would ruin their chances of being popular. I don't know what they thought the British press was going to do specifically, but they were scared of them.
The problem with the British press, and we've discussed the British press before, is you have your national tabloid newspapers, your Sun, your Mirror, the Star, and there's a few other newspapers which are absolutely terrible, the Sport, and that's absolutely appalling newspapers. But what they have a habit of doing is building people up very quickly and then cutting them down. And it's like it sort of fits their narrative of like always wanting to have someone on the paper. So like so some artists will be up and coming and they'll be the best thing ever. Then all of a sudden they'll make a misstep and then it's like bam, they're cutting them down. And I've heard of this phenomenon before where an artist will go and test what the act is going to be like, and they do it away from their home market.
Well, apparently that's what the Spice Girls were doing. And I mean, Istanbul, Turkey makes sense. That's pretty away from their home market. The other thing that I saw that I've seen a lot, and I, as a Spice Girl lover, has watched many documentaries and many interviews and things like that. One thing the Spice Girls did was they absolutely refused to play along with the media. When interviewing them, they took no prisoners. They said exactly what they were thinking, and they did not play that game. And even in Spice World, the movie, they make a joke about it whenever Geri says, well, is the Pope Catholic? And the whole media goes crazy. Oh, my God, the Spice Girls don't think the Pope's Catholic. Like, it's kind of making fun of that ridiculousness.
Yeah, and that's like what I said before, is that you make one very small misstep or something is overheard the wrong way, and then they cut you down. And I mean, I think they call it trial by media, where not necessarily like the Spice Girls, but someone supposedly did something wrong or did something illegal or whatever. And then the media have just decided that they're guilty and they splash it all over their tabloid newspapers. So in the eyes of the public, that person is guilty, and then they just can't work or do whatever they do again. And they've never actually been through a court of law or anything.
Yep, we have a big jury by fire or jury by media or whatever you want to call it, where it's silly. What you hear is what happened, regardless of what happened.
Sure.
With that being said, another thing that the Spice Girls did differently than a lot of other bands was licensing. They had Spice Girl dolls, beach towels, everything. And that was so smart. They're having each person so iconic. So you've got Baby, you've got Ginger, you've got Sporty, you've got, you know what I mean? Posh, they all had, and Scary. You had all of those very distinct things. And that's all very distinct things you could market, Tim.
That's true. I mean, I don't think I ever owned any Spice Girls merchandise, if I'm being honest with you. But I remember it being in the shops. Spice Girls pencil cases and Spice Girls sports bags and everything you wanted with the Spice Girls written on it.
And if you ask any girl my age, at least one Halloween when we were little, we all went with our friends as the Spice Girls. I was Geri, which doesn't make sense because I'm not redheaded and she wasn't my favorite, but I was Geri because that's who I got put as. But every girl my age, one Halloween, we all had to dress up as the Spice Girls. It never failed. I think my twin sister also did a talent show once where they were all the Spice Girls. They just marketed themselves so well. And say what you want. I mean, they're still the most, besides the Andrews sisters, there's a debate in America. In America, the Andrews sisters has paid or made more money than the Spice Girls, but the Spice Girls are still the most highest gross paid, whatever that word is, female act of all time. That's a girl group, not an individual artist. Because individual artists, I think, is still Mariah Carey, but as a girl group, they're still the number one. Universal.
Because there was, I think, originally, certainly in the UK, it used to be the Supremes. Mm-hmm. And then I think that got overtaken by Bananarama, and then the Spice Girls took over from Bananarama.
Yes. And so that's just, I mean, but that's crazy. And it's still to this day, like they have not been, like no other band has done it. And so say what you want about a manufacturer band. They knew how to sell merchandise. They knew how to become popular and they knew what they wanted to do. And I do think that the idea of putting them all in a house and making them become friends worked to their advantage.
Yeah, especially I mean, did they get on in real life? Did they get on, or was it just they were business partners essentially?
They did. I think when Geri left, there was some falling out. There's been some drama between Geri and Scary Spice now. But back in the day, as far as I'm aware, they were actually friends. So I think that makes a big difference with the band. Now, Tim, I'm going to talk about something completely random. Did you watch the Spice Girls halftime show? A halftime show. It's not a halftime show. Opening show of the Olympics.
No.
Okay.
I can honestly tell you that any given Olympic for the last however many years, 40 plus years, I could probably tell you exactly how many minutes I watched, and that would be none.
Okay, so I could care less about the Olympics. I can agree with you on that. But I have went back and watched the Spice Girls Olympics when they were held in Britain. That's whenever they did them. Mm-hmm. And they had one of the coolest, I guess, opening things or like something I've ever seen. Actually, one of the coolest just stage shows I've ever seen. So the stage, and I will post the video in the Facebook chat or Facebook group because it's one of my favorites. The stage is like a British Union Jack. Mm-hmm. And they performed on top of taxis, like the old school British taxis. And I mean, the taxis are moving around as they're performing. And it's live vocals. You can tell it's live vocals, at least for most of them, because you can actually hear their breaths and stuff in different deviations. It is live vocals. And the best part, though, that I only learned recently, or what I figured out, so Posh Spice comes in last. Her taxi comes in and parks. And when they're in their taxi park, they do beep, beep, or whatever, it parks or whatever. And they've got like flashing lights and it's playing up to their characters. Her taxi was fashionably late. That's amazing, right? I was like, because you see all of them park and they're all waiting. And then her taxi is the last one to come in. It's because she's fashionably late. I love that.
So were they sitting on the roof of the taxi?
They're standing. So they built like a platform So they come up and you see them come out, and it's like you hear, so they all get out of the side of the taxi, like just like they're riding in it, right? And it's very British old school taxis with a very formal looking driver, but the taxis like light up and are multicolor and super cool to match the Spice Girl. And so you hear Mel C comes out, she goes, "All right, ladies," or something, and then they start singing "Wannabe." And then they like have like a platform that they get on, and it raises up and it's on top of the taxi. They're holding on while singing live vocally. You can tell it's live because you can hear their breath. And the taxis start moving with them on it. And it's like they have to basically hold on. And good Lord, Victoria Beckham's wearing heels 74 inches tall. I don't know how she made it out of that taxi.
You know what this is like? This is like the time I got on John and Linda Jagger's roof when they held a festival in their garden, and I played the national anthem, and I had to climb up a very rickety ladder at the back of their house, and I got up there and then I played the national. I've actually done it twice, but I got up there, played the national anthem, and then had to sort of shimmy down the ladder back onto the ground. And John, who's a guy I played in Moroccan Soul with, he said to me as I got to the bottom, he said, "You wouldn't have really done that in real life, would you?" I said, "No."
So Tim is basically a Spice Girl. I will have to come up with Tim's Spice Girl name. I don't know what he would be, but we'll come up with one later. Because he's definitely not the sporty Spice.
No. In fact, whatever the polar opposite of sporty Spice is, that's me.
You're posh.
In fact, like sometimes when you go into like CVS or Boots for our UK friends, and you get like deodorant and it's like sport. Like,
yeah, pretty much.
I feel like if I buy that, I feel like a fraud.
Me too, because let's be honest, it's not a thing for me.
No,
not even a little bit. Yeah, they ride around on the taxis and they're singing live. And I mean, I remember I think they started out with "Wannabe" because let's be honest, it's their biggest, it was their first song, it's their biggest hit. And then "Spice Up Your Life," because that's like the big party hit. And that's when they're like holding on for dear life on these taxi cabs that are like zooming by, and I just hear them going, "Spice up your life," really loud as they're like basically flying across the stage. But it was one of the best, which I will say, if you go back and watch the Spice Girls like most recent tour they did 2-3 years ago, there was a lot of money in that production. Like a lot. Like the stage show itself is big and grandiose. And it was just because, England was holding the Olympics, so they had to go extra British, but it was super cool. Like, I remember Pasha's looks like it has like little studs on the side of it, like lights, like little studs. Geri's had a Union Jack. Scary's was like multicolored. Like they put, it was like very, but what was it? I heard this, and I don't know if it's true. And maybe it's something you could confirm or deny. They said part of the reason, so like when you're watching live sporting events and like artists, it's hard sometimes to hear them. Like it sounds like they didn't do a great sound check, but it's also like the event that they're at, and it's hard. They said that they could put, because that sometimes they use cars because they can put things in them to help amp up mics or something. Like there was something in the vehicle to help with the sound, and that was part of the reason why they went with the cars.
Well, I mean, you can have a monitor on each car so you could hear what you were playing. The problem that you have is that I'm assuming this was like some kind of massive Olympic stadium or something like that. Yeah,
it was enormous.
Yeah. The problem that you have with a very large venue, I mean, I've played festival-style stages.
You haven't played the Olympics, Tim.
No, I've probably played to 8,000 people, 7,000 people is the most I've ever played to. But the problem that you have in a large arena like that is that sound actually travels very slowly. So if you have speakers somewhere else in that arena that's playing the same feed that you're singing, you're going to be hearing echoes of stuff coming back to you, and it's really distracting. And I mean, even to the point, I don't typically use one, but I've had wireless guitar systems, and you don't have to walk very far from the front of the stage out to the audience before, when you hit a note, there's a real perceptible delay before the sound comes back to you. So you imagine that in a huge arena with multiple speaker sets all the way around, and how distracting it is when you're trying to sing to a track. I'm assuming they're singing to track, but they're singing to a track, and that track is then bouncing delayed from other speakers coming back to you.
I mean, that does make sense. So I guess that's probably a contributing factor. But I heard that was part of the reason I guess the cabs are just like the British, kind of thing. But it was also a play on, it was something that they could help with the sound by using the cabs. So I thought that was kind of cool. I would have never thought about that. But I heard that later, that there was a mechanism they put in the cabs to help with sound. Because I will say, as far as live shows go where people sing live, this one, and like with that big of an audience, it sounds really good. The sound's very good. Quality is good. So whatever that was, I thought that was a cool concept, and I'm sure the Spice Girls themselves didn't come up with that concept. Some producer somewhere, you know what I mean? The guy doing the sound came up with that concept, but it was an awesome performance. It's one of their more recent performances. And then this is backtracking, but I just wanted to bring up that performance because I loved it. But we're going to talk about a very sad thing, Tim. Geri quit. She quit on them.
It was right up there. When you think of rock and roll tragedies, you think of the day the music died. You think of the day we lost Freddie Mercury. You think of
Elvis dying.
There's the murder of John Lennon. The breakup of the Beatles. I mean, you think of the heavy hitting moments in rock history, and everything I've mentioned there pales into the just disappears. And then you think of Geri Halliwell leaving the Spice Girls.
I'm still hurt to this day, Geri. I know we've talked about it. If you're listening to the podcast, I sent her a message, but she didn't respond because obviously I talked to her. So she claims they were doing Mel B's birthday tour, and she just up and quit halfway through. She claimed she was suffering exhaustion. Now, I am going to make this funny because there's a few funny quotes from the other Spice Girls when she did quit. Mel C said, "Missing Geri is a lot like missing your mom. You miss her, but not her nagging."
Oh, dear.
And then Victoria said, "Well, there was one big plus. For the first time ever, I actually got to sing on Wannabe." So, and basically Geri said that she's apologized for quitting. She was just exhausted. She's frustrated. And something about being on the show prevented her from being on a TV being in the band prevented her from being on a TV show that was for people surviving breast cancer. I don't know. That was really random. That's just what she claimed. But basically she said, "Sorry, I left. I was just being a brat."
Did she ever come back?
She did. She was in the last tour.
Oh, okay. I didn't know whether she left and then it was peace and that was the end of that.
So she didn't. She signed up and did the last tour. Posh was not on the last tour because she's out there doing that whole fashion show empire thing, making a lot of money, and she has a really famous husband. If you haven't heard of David Beckham, I don't know if you've heard of that guy. He that's one of those sports events, isn't it? It's like I know it's not the one where they drive around in a circle. I do know that. No, it's not the one where they drive around in a circle. But I've heard he plays the soccer or the football, depending on where you're at. So apparently, at one point, did you know in the beginning the UK they refused to play the Spice Girls music?
It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, the problem certainly back then. I mean, as we've spoken of before, now I think the influence of radio and even TV to some extent when it comes to breaking artists is not as relevant as it used to be. But if I think back in the 90s, you had BBC radio, and then you had independent radio, and then you had like Top of the Pops or the ITV equivalent of that lasted for not for that long. So if those companies decided they weren't going to play your record, I mean, that's it. I mean, how else are you going to get out there?
I mean, that's fair. So basically what happened was, it says in the beginning, the UK radio stations refused to play the Spice Girls music, but TV loved them for some reason. TV liked them. Their first appearance came on an episode of, I don't know what this is, Cilla Black?
Cilla Black? Cilla Black, really?
It's very British to me. I don't know what is it.
Cilla Black is a performer, a 60s performer, came from Liverpool, basically hung her entire career on the fact that she used to be friends with the Beatles. And she was a singer and she had a number of hits. And then in the 80s, she had a number of TV shows. One called Blind Date. Which you could, so it's a TV show. You can imagine what goes on Blind Date.
I have a feeling it's about blind dates.
Yeah,
maybe.
basically. And you have two teams and
I get it, yeah.
And then she had a program called Surprise, Surprise.
That's the one.
Yeah. Surprise, Surprise was this TV show. And it was it had some comedic elements to it. And it wasn't really sketches. But the centerpiece of Surprise, Surprise is that she would bring families back together and things like that. And then at the very end of the episode, she would sing her song, Surprise, Surprise!
Wow. Okay. Well, I missed a lot there. We're going to have to find a video of her singing Surprise, Surprise or a picture or something because I don't know what's happening. But apparently they booked a spot on her show. They cornered the show's producer in a toilet and started singing an a cappella version of Wannabe, so they gave the slot.
Okay.
That's how they got on it.
Whatever it takes, I suppose.
It says they were folded into a segment where a teenager girl called Sally had won the opportunity to present a show on Manchester radio station Key 103 and interview a famous band. Sadly, the girl was disappointed that it was the Spice Girls and not Boyzone. That was the start of their TV career. And for whatever reason, TV loved them, and eventually UK radio had to get on board.
I know at the time Boyzone was a big thing.
I do know what Boyzone is. Well, I think we talked about them a few times. They weren't huge in America. They had like one or two songs, but I've seen them, and they if you've never seen them, they look exactly what somebody named Boyzone would look like.
And they were from Ireland, and the breakout star was Ronan Keating, if you've heard of Ronan Keating.
Not really, no. Was he did he do a solo career or something?
Yeah, he did. I mean, it was like the UK Irish equivalent of like NSYNC or Backstreet Boys. It was that kind of idea.
Yeah, I've heard one or two of their songs.
And the only reason I know about Boyzone is I used to work with a lady called Linda Dobson, who was absolutely obsessed with Boyzone and Ronan Keating. So
don't judge Linda; let her live.
I know. I mean, it's fine. I'm not judging it at all. But and she's also a super fan of Elvis.
Oh, well, he did kind of forefront a lot of I feel like Elvis forefronted a lot of what the boy bands did in a way. Now, Tim has a favorite Spice Girls song. What is it, Tim?
It's Who Do You Think You Are? Who Do You Think You Are, in my opinion, is probably the best of their catalogue. And even if you're not a Spice Girls fan, how can you not like that song? It has a funky bass line on it. It's got that synth horns on it, and it's got a great hook. It's a great song.
And it was on the original 1996 album. So it's the Spice album, which had a lot of their major hits on it. It was one of their very first songs. But I mean, I would say To Become One is, one of their famous. Viva Forever is great. Stop is one of my favorite, which was on the Spice World album. Too Much is great. And even, so we talked about their version of Gary Glitter's Leader of the Gang. Mm-hmm. Absolutely adore their version. And as long as it doesn't give money to Gary Glitter, I'm fine with it being played.
Well, here's a question for you. So, we've spoken about Gary Glitter in the past, and we're all in agreement. Everything he did is absolutely disgusting. And to that effect, you can never really listen to Gary Glitter music ever again.
He's one of the ones we've canceled.
Yeah, and for good reason. But here's a question for you. Philosophical question. If you have the Spice Girls covering that song that he did, is it acceptable to listen to that now, or does it still call back to Gary Glitter? Now, it's different. It's different, say, if it's like some kind of no-name songwriter of a song that you don't know anything about, and, that's the thing. But that song is so identifiable as Gary Glitter's work. Is it okay to listen to that Spice Girls song and enjoy it, or does it always call back to the heinous things that Gary Glitter did?
So my thing is he making money off of it? If he's making money off of me listening to it, then no, I probably shouldn't. But if he isn't he in jail?
Yeah, if he's not in jail, he should be in jail, or he is paying the price for his heinous crimes.
I guess the question is he getting royalties out of it? If he's getting royalties out of it in good conscience, I don't want to hear it. But I really do love their version in Spice World.
Isn't it? Did they not cut it out of Spice World? Because there is he was originally in Spice World, and they cut it out after everything came out about him.
They cut his part, but the song's still in it. So you hear so they're like supposed to be playing at like some plaza or something. I think it's Spain or Italy or something, because the guys that are like are either Spanish or Italian. I can't remember. So like what's funny though, and what's kind of ironic is you hear, come on, and then they turn around or whatever, and they wanted the backup dancers to wear really short shorts, and the girls refused because they said it was tacky, and they didn't want, that's part of the movie or whatever. And so you see the guys come up behind them, and they're wearing full pants, and the guy's like, how did you get him to do this? Oh, we had a compromise. And he's like, what was the compromise? And the guys turn around and the butts are missing from the pants. The irony is half the time you're not even paying attention to the song, because that's the joke. And yeah. And he's like, what are those spots? And he's like, that's the compromise. This is talking to their producer. But yes, the song is in the movie, but Gary Glitter is not.
Okay.
So they cut him out, but they kept the song, and their version's really good. I like their version better than the original. Just going to say it.
Well, I mean, anything is better than what Gary Glitter did at this point.
And then, I mean, something kind of funny, which on the original album, Saturday Night Divas, they actually, the more I think about it, a lot of their songs really could play it to a disco kind of thing, honestly. Mm-hmm. I mean, Saturday Night Divas, something kind of funny. Those are both kind of a very disco song. Now, the video Stop. So in the song Stop, I don't know if you've ever heard it, Tim. It's the one that's like, stop right now. Yeah, that one. So it's either taking place in what I think is like an Irish or a Scottish kind of town, very old school. And I will say it's almost silly to watch because it's a play on that. So it's like, we've got these cool, wacky, young, hip girls coming into this old Scottish town, and they're like doing their little dance, and they're trying to spice up, and they're like winking at the old men. And of course they're like staring at Geri and different things like that. That was the play. The video is absolutely silly. If you've never seen that video, I suggest going back and watching it, because they're like, at one point, I don't even know where the stage comes from. So they're like going through the town, and they're like all happy and like doing like, oh, we're so playful, we're young, we're hip, and the people are walking around, oh, look at all these young whippersnappers doing what they're doing or whatever. And I wish the people could see the hand motions I'm doing to interact with Tim right now to make this point, because it makes it funnier. But anyway, I'm pretending like I'm in the music video. But then like at some point they end up on a stage, and like all these people who look very like, why am I even here? Or watch them do the stop right now dance. And that's like the music video. And I've yet to kind of figure out what they were stopping or what it has to do with this town. Because like, say, who do you think you are? Or Say You'll Be There. They've got like the futuristic music video. And like most of the time it's just them kind of like, like them kind of dancing around and like just like not really a point to the music video, but for some reason Stop has that very specific. And then there's another one where it's the two become one. I'm guessing you've heard that song before too. It's very romantic. Yeah,
the thing is, I know all of these Spice Girls songs you're talking about, and I've heard all of them. And to be fair, I think if not all, most of the Spice Girls songs in my collection on my computer. The funny thing is, I have seen Spice World. I've seen it once when it was on TV at Christmas once. But the music videos, I have not seen any of those.
So, like, on Two Become One, I think they're in, like, Paris and maybe in front of the Arc de Triomphe or something. You know, like, how it's got, like, the big, like, 17,000 lanes with speeding cars right there. And so, like, you could see, like, what I think is the Arc de Triomphe. Don't quote me on that. I can't remember specifically where they were, but it's kind of like that. And they're, like, slowly walking out as the cars are, like, vastly going in front of them, like vastly, unless they're singing about Tonight Is the Night when two become one. And it's so ridiculous. As a Spice Girl lover, that is one of the most ridiculous music videos I've ever seen.
Do you want to know an interesting Arc de Triomphe fact?
What is that?
Well, the Arc de Triomphe in Paris has a massive roundabout going around it, which I think is what you're describing.
Yeah.
And it's written into every French car insurance policy. If you have an accident in that roundabout, everyone is at equal fault.
Well, that makes sense because I've been to Paris. I studied abroad in Paris, and that friggin' roundabout is absolutely crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I've driven in France a number of times. You know, we've discussed. You know, you can go across for the day, but I've never driven in Paris. So I've been to Paris many times, but I would never ever attempt to drive in Paris. I mean, I don't know if I want to attempt to drive in New York City. I mean, that's a mess. And I mean, I've driven in central London, which is not a lot of fun. But I've seen what goes on in Paris, and really, I'd rather not have anything to do with that if I could help it.
Well, weirdly enough, Salt Lake City in Utah has the same deal. So Salt Lake City is like the third most like dangerous city in the world to drive in or something in the United States or something. I lived in Utah for years and I lived in Salt Lake City, well, just outside of Salt Lake City. And it really was, I had a theory that the Mormons, there wasn't anything in their book that said they couldn't drive fast. So that's where they got their fun. But that's just a theory. Don't quote me on that. That's not to insult Mormons, everybody. Please don't hate me for that. But that was my theory. But anyway, so they drove ridiculous. And in Utah, if you get hit, everybody's at fault, regardless of Salt Lake City, regardless of who is at fault.
Oh, wow.
So you get the same amount of equal kind of like. So fun fact about Joy getting injured, which mind you guys, I injured myself while we were in the process of trying to start this episode. Your story, Tim, witnessed it. But I once was the pedestrian crossing the road in Salt Lake City and got hit by a car as I was walking across the road. And because of that law, I got a ticket too, even though I was the pedestrian. He got a ticket and I got a ticket because I was at fault and he was at fault. Even though he paid all my bills and it didn't go on my insurance, I still got a ticket too, even though I was in the crosswalk, was the person who didn't do anything wrong and got hit by the car. But because of the way the laws and the way the insurance policies are in Utah, you have to have what's known as like PIP insurance. I got a ticket too.
That is wacky. That is
and
very,
I got
very
hit
wacky.
in the car.
I've been to Salt Lake City. I've driven in downtown Salt Lake City. I remember pulling up to the car park, which is by the Pottery Barn, which is where the Hard Rock used to be. I remember parking there. I have a photograph of being there. I remember
I'll have to post it on the Instagrams, Tim.
Yeah, maybe that is an Instagram-worthy picture, the picture of the Pottery Barn and Hard Rock in Salt Lake City. I don't remember it being particularly wacky traffic, but it was in the middle of the day.
So it's not wacky like when you're in Europe. Like when I was in Greece, there's no way I'm ever driving in Athens. Like I would rather die, right? People just like do what they want. What they do in Utah, what the reason it's so dangerous is it's the interstate. So if you get on they call them freeways, but if you get on the freeway there, everybody's doing like 120 the entire time. For some reason, everybody in Utah gets on the interstate and thinks it's they're NASCAR drivers, not downtown Salt Lake, but like the areas around it. That's why it's like, I don't know what it is. So like there's constant just major wrecks all over the freeway because people drive like they can. I don't know for our British friends what 120 miles per hour would equal. It
would equal 120 miles per hour because the UK uses miles per hour.
Okay, good. I didn't know if they used kilometers or something. I had no idea.
So here's a question in Utah. Is Utah one of these states that doesn't have a speed limit?
No, it has a speed limit. They just don't care.
Oh, I didn't know if there's any holdout states that still do not have an interstate speed limit.
There was something in like the desert, maybe that like in the United States that there's no speed limit.
Because like certainly if you go to Germany, parts of the road system, the Autobahn, does not have a speed limit. And I remember driving my Skoda in Germany when I went to see my uncle one time. And if you're familiar with Skoda, but it's a sub-brand of BMW. It's a bit, sorry, it's a sub-brand of VW, not BMW. I wish it was a sub-brand of BMW.
There's a big difference there, Tim.
Yes, it's a sub-brand of VW.
Okay.
And they're kind of budget cars and they're okay. They used to have a bad rap for being, junky cars, but VW bought them and, they're just economical, regular cars.
Like a Fiat Uno?
No, but better made than a Fiat or any Fiat Uno or a Mini Metro for that matter.
Fair enough.
I remember being on the Autobahn in my Skoda doing 80, 85, and that thing is like it's about to explode at 80. My foot flat on the floor and going, and
sorry, y'all can't see. We need to do one where they can see what we're talking. We're very handsy. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, maybe one day we'll do a bonus episode where we publish the Zoom video at the same time. I don't know.
Because if you guys could see Tim in his little car over here flying down the interstate, you'd be dying too. All right.
Yeah. So I was going down. I said foot flat on the floor. The car felt like it was going to explode. I was waiting for a white flag to come out of the bonnet, and then
just snorted laughing. Okay, continue.
Yeah, and then people would pass you like you're not even driving. It's like boom.
See, that's what it's like to drive on the freeway in Utah, but they have speed limits.
Actually, now I come to think of it, there was another time I was in an Audi, a very fancy Audi that belonged to my aunt. One time I went out to visit in Germany, and we were on the Autobahn, and this was a very fast car, and I think she was doing the equivalent of... It was probably 110, 120, something like that. It was fast to be in a car, but it was perfectly legal because it's the Autobahn. And this Mercedes went bam past us.
There's always one.
Yeah. So I mean, it's wacky. I don't know. I don't know if Utah is quite the same thing. I don't know.
It's not quite that extreme, but it does feel like I would say the speed limit there probably like 70, like the average interstate, but everybody there does like 90 to 120. And that's why they get a bad rap for their driving. Like I said, I have a theory on why that is, but I just think everybody thinks they're race car drivers once they get it. And they have really big, kind of like you were saying, like in the Trump deal where they have like the big multi-lane. How many lanes would you say is in that? Like 1,000?
No, I think
I'm joking. It's just
I think
lot.
it's 4 or 5 lanes or something like that.
And so like the interstate's like that too. But what was weird was the first time I drove on one of the freeways in Utah, nobody warned me that there's like the regular freeway and then there's what they call Bangor Highway. I don't know the difference between a freeway and a highway. Don't get me started. I've always called them interstates, but that's a southern thing. With that being said, there was a thing called Bangor, and this was part of the reason. You'd be going 90, and then there'd be a stoplight. I was like, no one warned me there was a stoplight. There was no signs, no nothing. Out of nowhere, everybody just like stoplight. And it was like that the entire way down that highway.
Do you know what? I remember I went to Australia in 1998 to Perth. And I remember there was a similar road to that was like the equivalent of an interstate that was it's in kilometers, but the equivalent of 70, 80 miles an hour.
Yeah.
And I remember being with my uncle and he said, you need to watch out. He said, because there's a light coming up. And I was like, what?
You're like a stoplight. That's what I said. I was like, because what it was my normal route home, there was construction. So one of the girls I worked with said, follow me, I'll show you the alternate route. And I'm like, okay, cool. And she got me out there and, I could figure out my exit from there because it wasn't that hard. But I was like, who puts a stoplight in the middle of an interstate? There's people out there going, I thought this was a Spice Girls episode. I didn't know it was all about driving.
we cover a multitude of topics on this program.
So speaking of music videos, I'll bring it back home to the Spice Girls and we can end it. The video for Wannabe, so their most famous song, we all can talk about it, was supposed to be filmed in Barcelona. Have you ever been to Barcelona, Tim?
No, I've only ever been to Valencia in Spain.
I went to Madrid. I've never been to Barcelona. So anyway, so but I have Barcelona is I think like on the coast. Do I remember that right?
Probably. I'm not super familiar with the geography of Spain.
Well, you heard me I'm not. It's not like that's like my thing to know where people are and stuff. Like geography is not my strong suit. I've made many mistakes on this podcast, so that's wrong. Internet, don't come for me. Anyway, but when planning permission fell through, the group decamped to the unused Midland Grand Hotel in London's King's Cross. Do you know where that is?
Yeah, King's Cross.
Okay,
there's a famous station there called King's Cross.
The idea for the video was to recreate the same energy and dynamics that we showed when we crashed into record companies. So you know, like they kind of like intensely, like kind of like coming at you. They're coming down the thing and they're like jumping. Have you seen the video of Wannabe? Where like
yes, actually, I have seen that video. Yes, I have.
Okay, so they're like kind of coming at the screen intensely, right? They're like in your face, like. Yeah. So they said the idea behind the video was they wanted to show how they came into record companies, crashed, and were frantic. We evaded places and left people breathless. We had to bounce through the place singing Wannabe and sweeping away cobwebs. So while they're doing it in this little hotel, they're like trying to, or was it a hotel? What was it? Yeah, Grand Hotel. I guess it was old and not used. They said they were trying to mimic that kind of intensity that they came at the record companies with when they sold the song. But it was also, they're like wiping down cobwebs because it wasn't used. I thought that was kind of weird. There was an all-night shoot. It was freezing cold. If you look closely, you can see the band's breath turning into condensation when they sing. Do you know what the Midland Grand Hotel is?
No, it's not something I'm familiar with. I mean, Joy, it's been a while since I've been there.
Tim, you're supposed to be the aficionado on all things in England. We've talked about this.
To some degree.
Because I know all things in Virginia or the United States. Laugh. But it does say decant to the then unused Midland Grand Hotel. So at the time it was unused, but maybe it's used now. Don't know.
Maybe it was being refurbished. Who can say?
Is London's King's Cross? That's a train station, right?
Well, it's an area of London, but it's famous for having a train station.
Okay,
there.
So that's what I've seen it with been used for in movies and stuff. See, Tim, I know some things without having to be there. God,
I bet that hotel got refurbed and it's now a Tesco's.
Probably. What is it? We destroyed Paradise and built a parking lot.
Yeah, in England they destroy pubs and build Tesco's. Sounds
pretty accurate. I mean, in America, you can, get a Walmart and a Starbucks at any corner. So
that's true, but certainly around here, they tend to build stuff fresh because, like in the town that we live in, there's a whole area that they've redeveloped, and like a Starbucks has popped up, and Verizon stores popped up, and they'll build a whole brand new unit. But like in England, where space is at a premium, especially in London, what they do is they tend to refurb things. And one of two things happens. You have a pub or a hotel or some kind of building like that, and it'll be one of two things. They'll turn it into flats for people to live in, or they'll turn it into a Tesco.
And that's, what that makes me think of. So like, let's say you were in this pub in the early 2000s, you have very specific memories of it. And now you're sitting there going through the Tesco going, remember that time that Sarah got drunk over there?
And you know what? I have actually been there because the Red Lion in Twickenham, which is a very important pub. I met Hogg there for the first time, Paul Summerton. I met him there. I got involved with the jam night there long before I met Ian or any of the folks I know in the freak jam world. I got involved with that jam night. I used to go down there for karaoke at one point. I played there in many bands, and it changed hands a number of times throughout the years, and eventually it closed because it wasn't making enough money. And then Tesco bought it, and I would not spend any money in there because I didn't want to support it, but I did go in there once. Just for that thing. And it's funny, you go in that front door and you're like, oh, the stage was over there. And that's where I sat when I met Hogg. And that was that time when New Year's Eve and that happened. And that's where the pool tables were. And it's just weird.
It would be awkward because you're like, so that's that time that happened. And over there, that's what I imagine I would do too, because I'd be sitting there trying to piece it all out. Well, I'm going to leave it at this, Tim. And we can't leave the Spice Girls without talking about girl power, of course. Mm-hmm. So we're going to talk about Margaret Thatcher. So Current Affairs magazine, The Spectator, was the least likely place to find a Spice Girls in 1996. But when Simon, some name I can't say, some British dude, backed in an interview with the quartet, he certainly got his money's worth. After declaring we need more women MPs, Geri opinioned that the former MP Margaret Thatcher was the first Spice Girl and the pioneer of their ideology. I like the women, Melby asked. Even if her policies were hard-headed, she was a legacy with with a mixture. It made headlines. Pierce knows pop group adds spice to the Tories. I guess what that means. I guess Margaret Thatcher Tories. Wrote in the Times, meet John Mayer's last hopes, near The Guardian, and even diplomat Geri later walked back her comments. When I said Margaret Thatcher was the first Spice Girl, I wasn't claiming I was a real Tory. I just admire people with ideas. She wrote the official Spice Girl book. Even if it's not my point of view, I respect the fact that it takes dedication and guts to stand up and say what you believe in. And it was nice to see a woman do it.
Yeah, I mean, the Tories is how you would say it's like a conservative government.
Okay.
You'd say
I
that
assumed as I was saying that's what they meant, but I've never heard that specific term.
Yeah, I mean, you can have many opinions about Margaret Thatcher's policies and her government and things that went on under her prime ministership. But yeah, she was a very strong woman with very strong opinions and didn't mince her words. Now, as I said, you can discuss to the end of time whether the thing she did was good or bad or indifferent. However, she certainly didn't ever come across as weak.
I think that's what they were getting at, because one of the big things what I talked about when they interviewed earlier, they were known for not holding their opinions. Mm-hmm. And sometimes in female groups, women are told to hold their opinions and they're not allowed to have strong opinions. I think that's what they were trying to say. But as you can hear by some of the headlines, they were kind of laughed at. Because exactly. I guess not everybody likes Margaret Thatcher, which I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not that familiar with a lot of the MPs. So it is what it is.
No, I think discussing conservative governments in the 80s under Margaret Thatcher is a topic which is probably not suitable for this podcast. But if you're interested, I
would have an opinion on it either way.
If you're interested in that, look it up and then draw your own conclusions. That's what I'm
sure
say.
You can find a whole episode of it on another podcast.
Exactly.
All right. Well, that's it for us, Tim.
Well, that was a fantastic deep dive or medium dive into the world of the Spice Girls.
It wasn't that deep. Well, it was a spicy. Oh, by the way, Tim, if the name of the episode isn't like the story from A to Z or something, I'm going to be disappointed. Because of my pun.
I will see what I can do. I will exclusively reveal at this juncture before we go the title. That's my work. And also all the gumph that you see in iTunes or Google Podcasts or wherever you get it. That's my work. So, and
the little added, like if you listen to the last episode and you hear me trying to attempt to rap or me saying stupid things like there's a bat in my house at the extra if you make it that far, that's also Tim's work.
You know what that is? That is editor's privilege. That's what that is.
I don't even know they're there until I listen to the episode. All right, bye.
See you later. Bye-bye.
To remind me of another day to come.